Well, good morning, everybody. This is our seventh consecutive Sunday brunch at Film Days, but it's the only virtual one. I'd like to welcome, I hope, old regulars to this event, and more importantly, to our two guests, Michelle Lanier. Is it Lanier or Lanier? Lanier.
Lanier.
Okay. And Daniel Bennett. So, for the benefit of our audience, here's what I'd like to try to do. I'm going to ask a few questions, not for very long, of our guests. And maybe after 10 or minutes or so, you all can check in through your links and ask more questions of our guests. Everybody good? So Michelle and Daniel, are you ready to give it a shot?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. This is really basic stuff. Could you each, just for a couple of minutes, introduce yourselves? Tell us about who you are, and then we can ask more questions to have some clarifications. Like to know a little. Have you talk a little about who you are, where you're from, what you've done, and we'll go from there. I have a long list. So,
Okay.
So Michelle, why don't you start?
Sounds good. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Glimmerglass, for having us. My name is Michelle Lanier. I am an executive producer on MOSSVILLE When Great Trees Fall. I'm really grateful for this platform to help share the story of MOSSVILLE, which is a resistant story in global South environmental racism. And I am also from the global South. I call myself Afro-Carolinian. I have deep ancestral roots in North Carolina, and I was raised in South Carolina in the capital city of Columbia, but also in the Gullah community that is Hilton Head Island. A lot of people know it as a resort community, but I was also raised there. I am a folklorist. That is my graduate degree. You can go to school for folklore, and the way that I practice it is helping to illuminate and study and educate and amplify stories of the human experience through cultural traditions, expressions, practices, and beliefs. My heart is in what I call the Atlantic Black world, but particularly in the Carolinas. I am also an educator at Duke University at the Center for Documentary Studies. I've been teaching there for going on 21 years. And I am the first African American director for the state of North Carolina of 25 museum spaces, historic sites, and landscapes, which is called the Division of Historic Sites and Properties. Before that, I got a law passed to create the state's African American Heritage Commission. I'm a proud mother and a proud life partner to Thomas Easley, who is a forester and also someone who speaks truth to power around oppression. So those are some of my identities. I'm also the granddaughter of Anne and the daughter of Margaret.
And Daniel, before we go, let me say one last thing to Michelle. I'll say it in Gullah. In the words of Zora Neale Hurston, to know there, you have to go there.
Yes. To know there, you have to go there. You're right. Yes.
Right.
Well, my name is Daniel Bennett, and it is a heck of an act to follow. I'm always enamored by Michelle's accomplishments in life. I am born and raised in MOSSVILLE, Louisiana. I am a producer on the film, and my background is in photography and now in filmmaking. I do have two children myself who they're my life. Proud father. My wife is Teresa Bennett, and she and I actually have a small business in crafting and other things. My parents are strong activists, not only in MOSSVILLE for environmental things in general. Delma and Christine Bennett. I'm really proud to be a part of their lineage. I look forward to really speaking to you all today and just kind of not just being the voice, but learning from you all as well. I had a late night. Several of you may have had a late night as well. It's kind of early here in Southern Louisiana. So I'm still waking up, but glad to be here, guys.
So can we start with something like this? How did you each, obviously the answer for you, Daniel, is obvious, but I think it's worth talking about. How did you each get involved? What drew you to this project?
Yes, so I'll start, but I do think that Daniel's relationship to the project is not necessarily obvious and very, very, very important. So I'm excited for you all to hear about that. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I teach at the Center for Documentary Studies and have done so for over 2 decades. That led me into the world of documentary film. I didn't start in film. The Center for Documentary Studies is a really interesting interdisciplinary space. And when we talk about doing documentary work, we're talking multimodal. So we have people who focus on audio, who do public radio, podcasts, experimental art, music, poetry, murals, writing, nonfiction writing, as well as photography and film. I came into the work of teaching documentary ethics, community-based practice, community responsive practice from the perspective of my particular folklore matrix of identity, which likes to center people from within a community in whatever you're doing. And I'm an oral historian primarily. I love to work in audio. I also like to do performance art and experimental work. So film was not my first love or even what I would consider my expertise when it came to documentary work. But I had this very persistent student who is a producer on this film, who Daniel and I are family with. And her name is Catherine Ryerson. Catherine was a student of mine in 2013 and asked me to do something that I said no to at first, which was to watch a rough cut of a film about a hospital that got closed after Hurricane Katrina. The hospital was in New Orleans and it was called Big Charity. Very famous, important, old, free hospital that was closed after Katrina. And there was a lot of controversy around that, still is. And so I did not want to see that rough cut because I said, that's not my lane. But I ended up watching it because a huge thunderstorm broke out in Durham, North Carolina in the summer. And I said, well, we're not driving in this weather, so let's watch this rough cut. And I fell in love with the film, with the story, with the look of it, and gave a lot of notes. And those notes were taken back to the director, Alex Glustrom, who is the director of this film, MOSSVILLE. So 7+ years ago, I got to meet Alex. I ended up flying out to New Orleans, never had done this before, doing work that I call documentary doula work, which is helping them to birth the film, and also holding up a mirror of accountability around how the team was thinking about representation, particularly around issues of race and class as it related to that film. So fast forward, and a woman, a really important environmental justice thinker, leader, speaker, scholar, legal mind, Monique Hardin, approached Alex Glustrom at a showing of Big Charity, that film, and said, I have your next film. And that's what led Alex to then go to MOSSVILLE and did a huge amount of work before then reaching back out to me and saying, I think we need your help.
Is that the hospital where we see Stacy?
No, so Big Charity, so Peter, by the time Alex meets Stacy, Big Charity is closed.
Oh, okay.
And I encourage you and your guests to watch that film. It's available. Big Charity is a phenomenal film, but and it's a totally different part of Louisiana. It's not, I'm not sure if I have good connectivity. I hope I do. Can y'all still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not anywhere near New Orleans, and Daniel can give you the geographic, concept of where Mossville is. But Alex reached out to me and said, I think we need you to work with our team again. And that went from being a kind of consultant, advisor, documentary doula to, I think we want you to be executive producer. And then there were conversations about this amazing person named Daniel Bennett, who had been slowly but surely doing work with the film. And I went, I don't think I can be a Black person from the Carolinas coming in on this film team that's majority white and not open the possibilities for a producer with creative control being from the community, if that's at all a possibility. Being from the community, not from another part of the world, but actually from the community. And then Alex said, I have someone in mind who is from the community, who has the passion, who has the skill. And so I'll let Daniel tell his story of how he met Alex, because there's more to it.
So my parents are the activists. I have yet to this day to consider myself an activist, though I know that the work that I do lies in the realm of activism. However, the way I met Alex was actually kind of funny, because I avoided Alex. Actually, he came to meet with my parents and interview them for, to me, what seems like the millionth interview that they've done for environmental activism. And I stayed out of the way. I would go and visit my parents, and Alex was there, and I'd be like, "Hi, how are you?" I was more curious of his equipment because of my background. I was just kind of curious to see what he was tinkering with, what he was using to, take the information. However, my parents started pushing me towards Alex, and I was like, "Hey, I just want to stay out of this guy's way. I want to let him work." And Alex was kind of talking to me, and I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm kind of gonna leave that to them," because I was used to seeing white faces in the community asking, "Hey, tell me your story," and it was just, to me, felt like another white face trying to tell the story of Mossville, try to profit off of Mossville. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna avoid it. So I'll admit my bias there. However, after spending some time around Alex, it's a pleasure, to be around Alex. He's just such a genuine soul. Like he's a real down to earth guy. And eventually, I would kind of help as I could. I'd be like, I don't mind helping in this aspect. I don't mind doing this. I don't mind talking to you. I don't want to be in front of your camera at all. And eventually, I agreed to be brought on board. And it's been an amazing experience ever since. It was really breathtaking to be asked to be a part of the film, because of all of the documentaries and all of the news stories and all of the different articles and things that have been written about Mossville. Very, very few, if any at all, involved any community members actually being a part of what was there, actually having some creative control at all. And so to be asked to be a part of the team was actually really, really different. So growing up in Mossville, I had those different experiences that I think have been really important for the use of the film. One of the things that I brought to the table that was kind of a non-negotiable for me was making sure that we presented Mossville in a light of resiliency, showing that Mossville didn't fold over and die. Mossville didn't just give up. It was important that I showed that even though Mossville didn't have much representation, they still fought. And then it was a community of not, backwoods swamp people, but it was actually people who had intellect, people who had the ability to do things like build battery backups and banks, who were able to dig their own wells. This was a resilient community. And it was important that we showed that aspect, and we were true to what the community actually was. So being a part of the team was amazing for me.
And so, but how did the film come together? Who was it the director who was making decisions? What were you all doing, and how was the team working to tell the story that you wound up telling?
It's a big team.
Yeah. We were poking and prodding. It was a lot of give and take. It was a lot of push and pull, so obviously our team, I've never really worked in a more diverse group of people. We've had a lot of different people on the team. We have people who have LGBT background. We have Black people, we had white people. We just had a lot of people who had input that had a lot of different backgrounds. So anytime you merge so many different backgrounds, you're going to get a lot of different perspectives. And so there were times where we would almost come to a stalemate while making this film. And it was times where we just had to like, hey, stop guys, we're going to take a breather, because it was tense at times, because there were things that we were like, hey, should we, like one of the times that was really important to me was Michelle pointed out that the worker who you witness in the film stopping Stacy from leaving his property, we had footage of his face, and you don't really get to see his face in that film. And that was a strategic move, because we realized that this employee of this major corporation was in no way, shape, or form trying to hinder Stacy from doing what it was that he was trying to do. He was really just trying to feed his family. That man was there to work, and it was just another Black man who was trying to provide for his family. So we weren't trying to dehumanize or even criminalize his actions. It was just something that he had to make a decision in doing. So just subtle things like whether or not we should show that person turned into rather long conversations sometimes, where it came down to what was the right thing to do. Ethics was a huge part of what we did with the film. And so we pulled in a lot of different people. We have tons and tons of footage that never even made the cut because of the simple fact that it may not have been right for the ethics of the film. So it was a lot of give and take. And
Right.
Michelle did an absolutely amazing job in holding up that mirror of accountability.
I'm still holding the mirror, because the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of people I didn't realize this, that even when a film is quote unquote done, that your accountability work, your impacts in the world, you are still responsible for that. I think a lot of filmmakers would definitely push back. They're like, oh, it's art, I'm sending it into the world. However you respond to it is how you respond. But we were very intentional and still are, that we want to be consistently checking in with each other around what is the life of the film in this moment? What are our intentions around the way the film lives out into the world? You have to release some control around the ways in which some people receive it, but what are your intentions, and being really clear about that, and trying to have a sense of unity, which is not easy, even if it means like, let's find a way that we can kind of intersect these different perspectives and goals. So we have, I have to call out the rest of the team. I said Catherine Ryerson, producer, Katie Matthews, producer, of course, Alex Glustrom, cinematographer, director, editor. I am executive producer. And we also have another executive producer who came in with some really important funding at an important moment. That's Linda Karn. We have fiscal agency from the Southern Documentary Fund, as well as through Video Veracity out of New Orleans. We have, we had a virtual theatrical tour because of COVID-19. We were going to have an in-person theatrical run in New York, LA, Minneapolis. And so all that had to be done virtually. So we have like distributor and sound people who came out and volunteered as friends of Alex and Catherine and Katie in the New Orleans film community, which is so rich and generous, that just came out with their own equipment, tons of different drones and, doing all of this work. And then South Africa, there's a whole community in South Africa of people who were brought on board as fixers and advisors. Monique Harden is a consultant. So it's a huge, the extended family of MOSSVILLE, the town, is giant. And then the extended family of MOSSVILLE, the film, is huge as well. And so it was important for us to have creative control. Alex interesting in that he's very intense about his art, but he will defer to the collective when it comes to the editorial process. And in fact, we showed a rough cut of the film to a group of people in MOSSVILLE, including Stacey Ryan's grandmother, because Stacey did not want to, he actually saw a rough cut too, I think at some point. But Stacey Ryan's grandmother saw a rough cut, and there were some other people who saw the rough cut, including the Fisher family. And there was a comment or two from that rough cut that then meant that we had to do another edit very quickly in time for the international premiere at Full Frame Film Festival. So it's a very, I think, liberatory, decolonial, margin to center, speaking truth to power practice of documentary making.
So Michelle, this is Ellen Pope interjecting. I have a question here from Margaret Parsons, who's the curator and founder of Glimmerglass Film Days. And she is listening in, of course. And she's also the head of the National Gallery of Art's film program, and she also founded that. She writes, "Your words are so inspiring, and it's hard to believe that the earlier projects about MOSSVILLE did not involve members of the community. Seems like that would be the first thing anyone would think of. We have a lot to learn, and I'm so glad to hear your story about how this project came together. I hope MOSSVILLE has had a big audience. Has it been broadcast, PBS?" And then a follow-up question, which is a question for you specifically. I think she typed that when Daniel was speaking. And she asks, what does the term documentary ethics refer to in your mind? Can you talk us through that? Because we've had this come up in previous festivals.
Okay, so I'll start with the first question or the first comment. It is very, very, very common in the tradition of documentary work to absolutely not involve in the making of a documentary film the people who you're documenting. It comes out of the anthropological concept that of the mythology around objectivity. That if you're living in the community, you cannot be objective enough to observe the community or to speak with expertise because you need to speak from a distance, which is what the Academy, that's part of the toxic footprint of the Academy on the documentary world that also impacts journalism. And so it's now over, I guess, I don't know, the past 10, 15, 20 years, increasingly people are calling out the same phrase that the people living with disabilities phrase, there's nothing about us without us. You know, do not be making these decisions, telling the stories without having us at the table. And just having a Black woman of the South is for me not enough because I am not from MOSSVILLE, Louisiana. I've never even been to the state of Texas, Daniel. We got to fix that. Yeah. Yeah, like I've been to MOSSVILLE. Yeah. And I've been to, Louisiana. So, but it was really important for me not to just come in under the cover of Blackness and Southernness and be like, I know this story. I don't. I didn't grow up around petrochemical plants. So that it's not a surprise to me that all of these other reporters and documentary folks came in and just tried to quickly do something without having someone on their team who had creative control. So there's that. Where has it been seen? I am happy to tell you that the film has been seen on every single continent where people live except for Antarctica. We had an African premiere. We had European premiere. It was seen we were in an Australian film festival. It was in London. It has been translated into 5 different languages. The United Nations in Geneva plans to use it to tell a story of race and environmental justice. It is streaming on Amazon, iTunes, YouTube, Google, Fandango. It's won 15 awards. It was broadcast on PBS through the Real South series. And it is done very well. We are extraordinarily proud with it, how far it's gone, and to get emails from people all across the globe. I mean, Daniel can tell you about being in South Africa with the film because of the connections there. I'll say what documentary ethics means to me. Maybe Daniel, you can say what documentary ethics means to you, and then maybe talk a little bit about South Africa. But documentary ethics means that you need to, as a individual and as a collective, regularly think about, discern, and clarify in a way that you can be held accountable to what are your values in the project. And you cannot do it just once. You have to do it over and over and over again. I'm doing it in my head right now. There's some things Daniel just said a few minutes ago that have my wheels spinning on how we can push our needle even more in a more expansive way around the appropriate impact of this film. Reciprocity is a core value of mine. The thing is, there is not one dogma. Every maker is going to have their way of doing things. If you are Michael Moore and you want to do an expose, you're not going to go to a corporate, officer, a CEO, and say, I want to be, reciprocal with you, and I want to make sure that you're represented in a way where you feel seen. That's not that kind of film. I think you have to know who you are and what your intentions are, and check in regularly. That's my short version of documentary ethics. But I'd be interested to hear what you think that documentary ethics are, Daniel, from where you sit.
Honestly, to me, the ethics in documentary come along with not taking without permission. It's known to be a pretty extractive industry, but when you're dealing with people's lives, we have learned very swiftly how quickly, being present can change a person's life, and so we have to be extremely mindful about what president do to that individual, and I think every move that we make should be a well thought move, so that we don't adversely affect a person's existence just by us telling their story. We also need to make sure that we're telling the story that they want to be told in the most integral way that we can do so. I think we learned with Stacy that there were a lot of opportunities for us to fact check. We needed to do that. We needed to make sure that what we were presenting not only was, this is the light that we'd like to shed, but this is the most honest light in doing so. I just have a really simple thought process when it comes around ethics in general. And I think we all have that moral compass that says this is the right thing to do. And even in those times where that's a little murky, we definitely know, I think, as just generally good human beings, that like this is not okay and this is okay. And I think if you keep that in mind in filmmaking, that you'll kind of, regardless of what people think about it, you'll fall on the right side of history. As for ethics, that's where I stand now. Whether the film has been seen, I think I had a really exciting experience recently. I'm actually taking a class, and my professor brought up the MOSSVILLE film, for one of the assignments that we were working on. And I hadn't spoken with the professor about the film, and he asked the class to consider it, shed light on what we felt about it. And so I had an opportunity to share with my professor that, of course, I was a producer on the film. And it absolutely made my day, but not just because the professor brought it up, but just the simple fact that this film is spreading like wildfire, I don't know if I should say wildfire, but it's spreading quickly. But for people to know about little old MOSSVILLE is really, really important to me, but I was thinking about what you said, Michelle, when you said being objective, that's one of my things that I tried to be while making this film. She can probably attest to the fact that there were several times where I was like, I don't know if that's fair. The way we would consider, like, obviously many people that watch the film feel like we should completely eliminate the refineries. I don't really subscribe to that ideal of thought. I am one that believes that we should reduce overconsumption because I like air conditioning. I like to drive my vehicle. And while I believe that someday we may have a greener opportunity to do so, I don't know that we could completely eliminate the refineries to do so. So oftentimes when I'm speaking to different people about the film, they ask me my thoughts and I'm like, well, I understand the importance of what the refineries do, and I understand the things that they provide to us as a nation and as as a body in the world. But I also understand the effects, and I think until we can kind of gauge and find a good balancing act for that, there's still a lot more work to be done. And so, I think I'm as objective as one could be, being from the community, while still hearing where people really can feel on both schools of thought.
Well, and I would always, Dan, you've heard me say, I don't believe in objectivity. I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah.
And it's not something I aim for. I want you to, I actually I want you to be subjective because I think it gives richness to our work. But what I'm hearing you say is that you have made attempts to be balanced. And what I would call, like, it's a concept I call a prismatic approach. You could look at something through a beautiful rock crystal, paperweight, and it will just magnify the words that are under it. And it's smooth, it's satisfying, and it's like, look, this is the story I'm looking for, which is what a lot of makers do. But I have a different approach. I want to take that same crystal and I want to carve facets into it. I want to know Daniel's reality, and I want to know Haki's reality and Stacey's reality and the Fisher's reality and the different generations. And I want to carve all of these facets into that same smooth crystal until it's etched all around. And when you put the light of inquiry through that, we know we have a prism and we get a fuller spectrum of a story with more color and nuance. And so I call that a prismatic approach. That's a concept I use when I teach. And so for me, Daniel, what you've done is you've kind of pulled back a little bit from your own personal experience and tried to look at, MOSSVILLE through all these different eyes, which I think is magnificent. So I'm a huge Daniel Bennett fan.
Reciprocated.
So let me ask a follow-up to this general topic, and you can play with it as you will. This was a beautiful, terrible movie because it was, and that initial shot of Stacey chopping the tree and the camera pulling back and revealing all the chemical plants said to me as a movie watcher, this is going to be Stacey's story. And I wonder how it came to be Stacey's story. And by the end of the film, I felt like I was intruding. I felt it was so intimate that I didn't really belong there because it was so successful that way. But I don't know if that's just a particular individual response.
That's Alex Glustrom. It's not Stacey's story. It is a story of MOSSVILLE through that moment in Stacey's life. I mean, this is why we really wanted to include the Fisher family. I am a feminist through and through, and gender balance is really important to me. And that collective of Black women, multi-generational, we see Erica and we see Destiny. Then we see Destiny holding her little girl. And then we see the photographs of the women before it. Well, actually, no, we see Erica's mom too. So we see all these generations, and then we see the photos. So then the ancestors are in the room. And so, but the intense moments, the intimate moments, this is what environmental racism feels like in the body. That's Stacey. And then we go and I think it's so powerful because it's like we feel it in the bones through Stacey, in the heating of the Dinty Moore stew.
Yes, that's an amazing moment.
In the injection of the insulin. It's in the body, in the bones. And then we pull out a little bit and we go, who else is around nearby, and we see the Fisher family, and then you take this global leap over to South Africa to see what's happening in the twin city of Sasolburg and Secunda. So to me, we don't belong there. I mean, it is, there's no money you can pay for the kind of access that Stacey gave to Alex. And he gave it willingly. He gave it generously. There is a sacred relationship that Stacey has with each and every one of us in different ways. Daniel, I'll let you talk a little bit more about your relationship to Stacey. But the discomfort of holding the gaze of the camera on what environmental racism looks like up close inside your body was deliberate. It's to say, if you leave, don't you dare leave this film feeling comfortable.
Well, it worked.
I agree. There was it was strategic. It was really something that we thought out. Like, what did we want you to leave with, this happy, oh, all is well, or did we want you to leave like, how do we make this not happen again? And ultimately we knew that that was what needed to be done. You needed to stir in your seat. You needed to feel uncomfortable in your spirit, because we needed to light a fire of ambition to change. One of the moments for me that stood out in South Africa, we didn't have the best turnout at the film, actually, because it really wasn't promoted the correct way there. But we did have one person who went and who I had an opportunity to speak to. She came out of the film. She thought that the film was about trees. I guess she thought it was something about arborists. But when she came out, she looked visibly shaken. She looked disturbed in her spirit. And I'm not a shy guy, so I may have even startled her more. But I approached her and I quickly asked, "Ma'am, could I please get some feedback? Can I hear what you have to think about this film?" And she didn't know. She just felt like, I don't know if all of this is true. I don't know if this is happening. I don't know if this is what's really happening to these communities. And that for me was the exact response that I wanted people to feel. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to feel like, okay, this is okay, this is or this isn't happening. Now I know, I feel in my spirit that she left and she had to find out, like, is this really happening? Like, is this something that's going on our planet? And if we can light that fire, if we can really make people feel like, well, I gotta know if this is existing, then once you find out that this is in fact true, you've got to do something about it, because it's not just MOSSVILLE's story. Like we said, it's not just Stacey's story, but we only have one planet. We literally share this planet. Once it's destroyed for all of us. And once there's no more resources for the refineries to use in the MOSSVILLE area or in Secunda, they've got to find somewhere else. They've got to do it somewhere else. And it could be your backyard, And until we do something to really change that, then we're all going to sink together. I literally had that conversation with a friend. It's really as simple as elementary economics. There's resources that are renewable and there are resources that are non-renewable. And if we aren't mindful about our non-renewable resources, then eventually we will be without them and we will have to figure it out. And at that point, it may be too late.
And individual human beings are not renewable resources.
Right. And
once a person is gone, they're gone. And I say this, as we were on our way to premiering the film, I remember that, Daniel, you lost a relative.
I've lost several relatives over the course of the film. Yeah.
And I think it goes without saying that many of those deaths were contributed to by the environment that these folks were living in, the air quality, the water quality.
We live in Cancer Alley, and I've lost several family members to cancer. Lost an aunt, an uncle. We had leukemia. We had breast cancer, and it's commonplace here. My sister died, but there's we all I'm sorry, y'all. Got a little emotional there. Give me just a second. It's something that we deal with, but it's preventable. It doesn't have to be this way. And I don't hold the refineries single-handedly responsible. I share in that as well. I always go back to the consumption. These refineries literally make what we ask for. It's supply and demand. It's really a simple concept. So their ultimate goal is to profit, but we determine just how much they profit. We determine just how much they produce. It's our responsibility to slow that steady trickle. If they don't have the demand, then they don't create the supply. But because of how much we use in this country, they're continuing to produce more and more and more. And eventually there's going to be a wall that we're going to hit. So I think we have to do something.
Yeah, and I think we've hit that wall. And I increasingly because the film's over, it's like a year and a half old now.
Doesn't feel like it that long.
No, because it was April of 2019 that it was launched.
Yeah.
But over time, talking about it, there are things that have become more clear to me, like the importance of creating structures to protect Black land ownership, Black communities, heirs property, laws and policies around what kinds of checks and balances need to be put in place around industrialization, laws and policies that support historic Black communities in becoming incorporated so that they will have more political power when it comes to deciding which industries they want to welcome, which ones do they want to slow down. And I'm also very clear to Daniel's point that we are all Sassel and we are all MOSSVILLE.
Mm-hmm. It's just one.
And we are all Stacy. We are all of that, all of us.
I have a question here again from Peggy Parsons that, and this is a question I have too, because before we all started the live stream, you mentioned something about, you were talking with Peter about an idea that he had, and you asked, where's the joy in that film? And, or in that project. And Peggy wants to know if you're working on any more films or have plans to that focus on environmental racism, because it's clearly a story that needs to be told over and over again to have the impact it needs to have for our societies to change. So what are you working on, and is there joy in it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the film industry has been pretty deeply impacted by COVID-19. And I would say our team is still really wrestling with the work of this film. I think we are coming to a place where we're about to let this bird really, fly where it will. But I still feel like there's some nest work that's happening with the film around impact. I mentioned we have an impact producer, Lentoria Newton, and she is right in the middle of impact work. Impact producing work is someone who comes on and helps to think about the ways in which the film, a film that is dealing with a social justice issue can be catalyzed in a way that makes it effective in creating change, sustainable change related to that particular issue. And so we are still in that work. And so I'm really focusing on that. In terms of my other work, I have so many identities, in terms of being a writer. Writing is really important to me. I think if I were to do another film right now, it would maybe be experimental. I think it would focus on Black women and land. So land is important to me, and that to me is a part of environmental justice. I think it would be about trying to tell a new story about the South through the Black experience of home and identity, which I think also is a way at getting at feeding the movement around environmental justice, because environmental racism is a particular experience. I believe in not talking about oppression without talking about resistance. And for me, part of feeding the resistance is creating, the joy. So for me, the joy is, I'm talking about this concept called womanist cartography, which means that you cannot talk about the South without looking at the lives and feet and dreams of Black women. And look at here, Stacey Abrams in Georgia, making a huge impact on the entire world. This is a Black Southern woman. And I'm ready for Black Southern women to have our due when it comes to the ways in which we have shaped the world and the ways that we absolutely call South home and claim that space. I am a Southerner, and I'm proud to be a Southerner, and I stand on battlegrounds that were Confederately charged, and I do so with bravery and self-determination. And there's a line in the Spelman hymn where I met Stacey Abrams that says, "Undaunted by the fight." I'm not willing to relinquish my Southern heritage to white supremacy as a Black woman. And so if you want to know what I'm working on, it's that resistance.
I want to pull the lens out one more question for me. It's a question that's connected to work I've done about cities. When the old editor of the Amsterdam News told me, he said, that word urban renewal, that means Negro removal. How in the world did this happen in this part of Louisiana? Who's responsible for allowing this petrochemical empire to arise unregulated, unzoned? To me, it's a very powerful political question. I wonder what you've thought about that.
I think we're all responsible, but I guess to be more specific,
yeah,
these refineries were brought in because, and I think it was a situation where they knew exactly where they could get away with it. I don't think it made the cut, but there was a time where one of the local attorneys pointed out, and he said, right on the other side of that bridge, they would have never allowed this. Well, that was the prominent white community. They would have voted it out as soon as the zoning vote came in. It would have been a no-go. It would have been an absolute not a chance. But because there was little to no representation in Mossville, because of the era that we were living in, the Jim Crow era, there wasn't a voice for the Black community. And so when they wanted to come, they were easily able to come in and just start building. So when the voice became bigger and bigger and bigger, there were more pushback on like, hey, we don't want more, but there's still no representation. And to this day, there was never any representation from Mossville. It came down to dollars and cents. It came down to, well, what's more important, the poor Black community that is, or will the refinery that's going to bring billions of dollars into the economy? Which one do we need more? And so it came down to the disposable human, the dispensable person. Like, we'd much rather have these billions of dollars influxed into the economy rather than have this small Black community who some might say didn't have anything to offer. So to be held liable, I would say it would be our government officials. It would be our senators. It would be our, it would be those who are set here to represent, who are here to protect. And they dropped the ball because the money became more important than the people.
Which is what Black Lives Matter is also about, and and the cry of people over property, not profits over people. And yes, the idea that Black people or otherly able people or LGBTQ plus people or immigrants, that somehow those bodies are less worthy of health and wellness and longevity, or that they are disposable, is white supremacy. And unfortunately, white supremacy can live in brown bodies like Governor Jindal.
That's what I was about to ask you. What about that?
Yeah, white supremacy, there's something called internalized white supremacy. I have to take my anti-white supremacy vitamins every day, as will our vice president-elect. White supremacy can live in, it is not about white people, it is about a concept that places whiteness and white people and the aesthetics of whiteness and the potential to strengthen the aesthetics and the concepts of whiteness as valued more than any other way of living and any other kind of human population, which is why wealthy white people try to get poor white people to align with them for elections, but then don't give a shit about them when it comes to, and we'll talk horribly about them, calling them trash. Because I've heard white, wealthy liberals call poor, rural white people trash to gain points with me, political points with me. And so it is a concept. It's not about white supremacy and whiteness are not the same thing as white people.
Okay.
Ellen, do we have more questions coming in from our vast audience?
We don't have more questions. Peggy followed up on an earlier question. I mean, I'm just fascinated by this conversation. I think it's fabulous, and we're going to be publicizing that everybody needs to tune in and watch it. But Peggy wanted to know, going back to Michelle's focus on women in the land and home, the concept right now in the South. Women, homeland, Southern and Black focus, great topic. Why not a documentary on Stacey Abrams?
I would love to see a documentary on Stacey Abrams, and I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure someone's probably already optioned that. Stacey is probably already working on that. No one say, let me just say this. Stacey Abrams was my student government president when I was at Spelman at the age of 18. And I haven't been 18 for a long time. I've known Stacey Abrams a long time. Stacey Abrams is brilliant and was brilliant as a young woman. And I'm so proud of that sister. And she was just like that as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, just like what you see today. So Stacey probably already has a film team, crew, director, editor, funder for that film. And if anybody wants me to just be a bag carrier, water bottle, glass and metal water bottle carrier for this film, I would be humbled, but I'm sure she already has that team. If somebody calls me and says, come join that team, I would be, yes, I'll join that team, but I'm sure that's already done and handled.
That's I actually knew Stacey when I worked at my previous job. We took her on a trip to Europe for the Young Leaders program. Yeah. And she was just as brilliant then. That was about 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So, Daniel was gonna say something.
Yeah. No, it's just I never have these conversations without fulfilling my promise to Stacey Ryan. Stacey, he asked me while passing the torch, I guess he passed the torch in his way. He said, my work here is coming to an end, but it's your turn. But he asked me to remind everyone that people died in MOSSVILLE. He told me to make sure that people know that there were lives lost and that there are lives currently being lost. So it's been really important to him that people know that this fight is not over. Mossville's fight is not over, but also the world in a whole is still fighting for a better life for those who are having to be exposed to these refineries. So I just ask that everybody stay encouraged. People often ask, what can we do? Well, I think that everybody should do their own small part, whether it's, you start in recycling if that's not something you do, or whether it's you use less electricity, or whatever it might be, do whatever it is that makes you feel like you're doing your part and never feel like it's too small. I think that what we're facing is a major issue. And I think it's really, really important for people to understand that people have truly died. Like, I've lost family, Stacy's lost family. There are a lot of people who, and I think given the COVID situation, I think that people really can understand how interconnected we truly are. So I think we should take this opportunity to really learn about it and do something about it.
Well, I've just received a signal from headquarters saying that it's time to thank you both enormously for being with us today. And I'll add my particular voice to that. It's a pleasure to meet you, and your film was heartbreakingly beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Come back next year.
Thank you. I want to come see Glimmerglass.
All right, we'll do that.
All right, y'all. Be well. Take care and stay
We'd be
safe and
delighted.
healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ellen.
you, Peggy and Ellen. Good night.